3 pregnancy tests, 1
I
billionaire,
can't believe this is
0
happening.
empathy. That's what Brielle Montgomery held in her trembling hands the night her world shattered. Rain hammered against the windows of Devin Carrington's downtown penthouse. $20 million of glass and marble that suddenly felt colder than any place she'd ever stood. She'd rehearsed this moment 100 different ways, practiced the words in mirrors, in her car, in quiet moments before sleep. She thought he'd smile, maybe even propose. Instead, he pulled out his checkbook. "I'll cover all expenses," he said, pen already moving across the page. "500,000 if necessary. But this cannot become public knowledge." The checkbook sat between them like a loaded weapon, leather-bound, monogrammed, a billionaire's solution to what he called personal instability. Brielle watched ink form numbers, zeros stretching across expensive paper, and realized she'd never really known this man at all. The man she loved, the CEO who'd whispered promises about building futures and starting foundations, now sat calculating how to make this inconvenient situation disappear. His reaction made it clear. Their baby didn't fit into his carefully planned life. He wanted her to handle it quietly, to make a choice that would protect his billion-dollar deal instead of their future together. "You're complicating a $3 billion acquisition," Devin told her, barely meeting her eyes. His attention stayed fixed on the documents covering his dining table. Financial projections more important than the woman carrying his twins. Yes, twins. A boy and a girl she'd just learned about hours earlier. He never bothered to ask. Brielle's hands moved instinctively to her stomach, protecting lives he'd already decided weren't part of his plans. The rain outside matched the storm building in her chest. She'd walked into that penthouse with hope. She left with something far more dangerous, determination. That night, she ripped his check into pieces and scattered them across his marble floor. She walked out of his life, out of his billion-dollar world, and into a future he assumed would end the way he demanded. He assumed wrong. 6 years later, when Devin Carrington spotted a woman at a charity gala who looked hauntingly familiar, he had no idea what he was about to discover. No idea that the choice he made that rainy night had consequences he'd never calculated. No idea that she'd kept those twins, raised them alone through poverty and exhaustion while he built his empire. And absolutely no idea how obsessed he'd become when he finally learned the truth. Stick around, because what happens when he finds out she kept those twins will shock you. Hit that like button if you've ever had to choose between love and survival. This is Brielle's story. This is what happens when a billionaire realizes money can't buy back what he threw away. But let's go back to where this all started, because you need to understand what made the betrayal so devastating. 2 years before that rainy night, Brielle Montgomery walked into a charity gala wearing a borrowed dress and genuine hope. She was 26, working as a volunteer coordinator for an arts education nonprofit, the kind of job that paid in purpose rather than paychecks. Her monthly salary barely covered rent in a studio apartment with unreliable heat, but she showed up to that fundraiser anyway because she believed in the cause. Devin Carrington stood across the room surrounded by investors, venture capitalists, and people who measured success in equity percentages. At 28, he'd just closed a $400 million Series C funding round for Carrington Technologies. His cybersecurity software was revolutionizing how companies protected data. Business magazines had started calling him the youngest billionaire you've never heard of. He should have been networking, building connections, playing the game every startup founder plays. Instead, he walked straight to Brielle. "Tell me about your theater program," he said, genuinely interested in the silent auction item she'd been arranging. "How does bringing Shakespeare to elementary schools change anything?" Most wealthy donors asked that question with skepticism. Devin asked it with curiosity. They talked until the gala staff started stacking chairs. He asked for her number. She gave it, half expecting he'd never call. He called the next morning. What followed felt like something out of a movie. Weekend getaways to coastal towns where nobody recognized his face. Private jet flights to secluded beaches where they'd walk barefoot and talk about dreams that seemed possible when they were together. He spoke about expanding his company internationally, building schools in developing nations, maybe starting a foundation once his wealth stabilized. She told him about the kids in her program, 7-year-olds who'd never seen live theater discovering they could be Juliet or Hamlet or anyone they wanted. How art gave them permission to be bigger than their circumstances. "You're changing lives on a teacher's salary," Devin said one night as they watched sunset paint the ocean gold. "What could you do with real resources behind you?" She imagined children with his strategic mind and her compassionate heart. Every woman in love has pictured that future, right? The family you'll build, the life you'll create together. But there were signs. Small things she explained away because love makes you generous with excuses. He kept their relationship private. "The board scrutinizes everything I do," he'd say. "They're already nervous about my age. If they think I'm distracted by personal matters, they'll question my focus." She understood, or she thought she did. He'd cancel plans last minute when investors called, disappear into work for days without much contact, then reappear with apologies and that smile that made her forget why she'd been upset. "I'm building something bigger than us right now," he'd explained during one of their late-night conversations. "Once this acquisition closes, once I secure the company's future, we can be public. We can build that life we talk about." She believed him because she wanted to. Because when someone tells you they love you while standing in ocean waves or whispering promises in the dark, you choose to believe the moment is real. Looking back, she'd realize those were warnings. His fear of losing everything, his obsession with board approval, the way he compartmentalized his life into business and everything else, always prioritizing the former. But you don't see red flags when you're wearing rose-colored glasses, do you? So when Brielle discovered she was pregnant 2 years into their relationship, she walked into his penthouse expecting joy. She had no idea she was about to meet a completely different man. The penthouse that night looked like a war room. Acquisition papers covered every inch of his glass dining table. Financial projections, valuation reports, legal documents stamped with figures that had 9 zeros attached. Devin barely glanced up when Brielle arrived. He was annotating something, red pen moving across pages that represented his entire future. Or so he thought. "Can this wait?" he asked. Not unkindly, just distracted. "I'm reviewing the final terms before tomorrow's board meeting." Brielle's hands tightened around her purse. Inside sat 3 pregnancy tests, 3 positive results that had turned her world upside down in the span of 2 hours. She'd scheduled an appointment with her doctor for the following morning, but she couldn't wait, couldn't hold this news inside while pretending everything was normal. "It can't wait," she said quietly. Something in her tone made him finally look up. Really look at her. She watched recognition cross his features. The nervousness, the way she stood too still, the fact that she'd shown up unannounced during the most critical week of his professional life. "I'm pregnant." 2 words. That's all it took to watch the man she loved disappear and someone else take his place. The silence stretched so long, she could hear rain beginning outside. Fat drops against floor-to-ceiling windows that usually made her feel like they were floating above the city. Tonight, they just made her feel trapped. "You're certain?" His voice had gone flat, professional, the tone he used during conference calls with investors. 3 tests. "I have an appointment tomorrow to confirm, but yes, I'm certain." Devin set down his pen with deliberate care, pushed back from the table, walked to the window and stood there, hands in his pockets, back to her. She watched his shoulders rise and fall with measured breathing, the way he composed himself before difficult negotiations. "This complicates things." The word hung between them. Complicates. Not wonderful or unexpected, or even, "we'll figure this out." Complicates. Like she just informed him of a scheduling conflict or a budget shortfall. "Devin, we've talked about the future, about eventually. Eventually isn't now." He turned, and the coldness in his eyes made her take a step back. "I'm 3 months from closing a deal worth $3 billion. My investors are already scrutinizing every aspect of my life. If they discover I have personal instability—" "A baby isn't instability." Her voice came out sharper than intended. "This is our child. It's a risk." He said it like he was explaining basic math to someone who didn't understand numbers. "My trust fund has specific stipulations about heirs. My grandfather designed protections around the family fortune. If I have a child outside of marriage, outside the conditions outlined. It triggers clauses that could cost me controlling interest in my own company. Brielle stared at him. So marry me. The words surprised her as much as they seemed to surprise him. She hadn't meant to propose, hadn't meant to sound desperate, but watching him calculate their baby's existence like a balance sheet broke something inside her. That's not the solution. He moved to his briefcase, pulled out something leather-bound, his checkbook. I need you to reconsider this. I'll cover everything. Medical expenses, recovery time, whatever you need. Money isn't an issue. The checkbook emerged like a weapon. She watched his pen move, forming numbers she couldn't process because her brain had short-circuited somewhere between reconsider this and the amount he was writing. $500,000. He was offering her $500,000 to choose a different path, to not have this baby. You want me to? She couldn't finish the sentence. Her hands moved instinctively to her stomach, protective of the life growing there that he'd already categorized as a problem requiring a solution. I'm being practical. We're not married. This wasn't planned. I have responsibilities. I'm carrying your child. The words came out louder than intended, bouncing off expensive walls and designer furniture. Our child, and you're treating this like risk mitigation. Because that's what it is. His voice stayed level, controlled. I've worked too hard to lose everything now. And what about me? What about us? He didn't answer. That silence said more than any words could. Brielle looked down at the check he'd extended toward her. At the zeros that represented his solution. At the man she'd loved who was offering money instead of support. Money instead of partnership. Money instead of love. She took the check. For one moment, hope flickered in his eyes. Then she ripped it into pieces. Methodically, deliberately, she tore that check into confetti and let it scatter across his marble floor like snow. Each piece represented a dream dying, a future dissolving, a love she'd believed was real, proving itself hollow. I'll handle this, she said, using his words against him, just not the way you want. She left that night with her dignity and nothing else. Left behind the man she'd loved, the life she'd imagined, the future they'd talked about building together. 3 weeks later, a certified letter arrived from his attorney, clinical language explaining that Mr. Carrington had no interest in pursuing paternity claims and requesting she refrain from further contact. Legal terms that felt like being deleted from his life with the stroke of a pen. She filed that letter away and made herself a promise. Her children would never know rejection from someone who should have loved them. If their father chose wealth over them, she'd choose them over everything. And she did. The months that followed tested Brielle in ways she never anticipated. Her modest salary as a nonprofit coordinator barely covered rent before. Now, with morning sickness making every workday a battle, she could barely keep up. She moved from her already small apartment to an even smaller studio in a neighborhood where sirens wailed through the night and the elevator sat permanently broken between the third and fourth floors. $20 million away, Devin slept in his penthouse. She climbed 4 flights of stairs with groceries, one hand on the railing, the other on her growing belly. But she wasn't alone for long. Rhonda Jefferson, a 62-year-old grandmother who worked the front desk at Brielle's nonprofit, noticed everything. The crackers Brielle kept in her desk drawer, the way she'd disappear to the bathroom at odd times, the exhaustion that clung to her like a second skin. How far along are you? Rhonda asked one afternoon, not unkindly. Brielle tried to deflect, failed, ended up crying in the break room while Rhonda held her hand and listened to the whole story without judgment. Well, Rhonda said when Brielle finally finished, that man is irresponsible, but you're not raising this baby alone. I've got 4 kids, 7 grandchildren, and more casseroles in my freezer than sense. You're family now. And just like that, Brielle had a lifeline. Rhonda accompanied her to the ultrasound appointment that changed everything. The technician moved the wand across Brielle's stomach, squinting at the screen with professional focus. Then she smiled. Well, Mom, hope you're ready for double the blessings. You've got twins in there. Twins. A boy and a girl, the technician explained, pointing to the screen where Brielle could barely make sense of the grainy images. Joy flooded through her first. Two babies, two hearts beating strong. Then terror crashed in right behind it. Two babies meant double the expenses, double the diapers, double everything. She tried calling Devin one last time, left a voicemail explaining about the twins, her voice shaking with hope that maybe this news would change his mind. He never called back. His attorney did, though. A certified letter arrived 3 weeks later with language so cold it could have frozen water. Mr. Carrington had no interest in paternity claims. Please refrain from further contact. Brielle filed that letter in a drawer and made her choice. If he didn't want them, she'd want them enough for two parents. Hudson arrived first, wailing with impressive lung capacity that made the delivery nurses laugh. Sienna followed 3 minutes later, quieter but watchful even in those first moments. Brielle held them both, tears streaming down her face, whispering promises she was terrified she couldn't keep. Those early years blurred together. She learned to function on 3 hours of sleep, learned to make one rotisserie chicken stretch across 4 dinners, learned to cut their hair herself using video tutorials and prayer. She stopped buying new clothes, stopped going out with friends, stopped doing anything that didn't directly serve keeping her children fed, healthy, and loved. But while Brielle learned to survive on fumes and determination, Devin Carrington's star kept climbing higher. When the twins were 18 months old, he sold Carrington Technologies for $3.2 billion. Top media outlets profiled him as a visionary. Business magazines put him on their covers. He launched Carrington Ventures, investing hundreds of millions in biotech startups and renewable energy companies. He dated actresses who wore designer gowns to charity galas. His life looked like a highlight reel of success. Meanwhile, Brielle enrolled in night classes to earn her master's degree. She'd study after Hudson and Sienna fell asleep, surviving on coffee and sheer stubborn will. The degree took 3 years, but it opened doors. She moved into a development director position that nearly doubled her salary. They upgraded to a 2-bedroom apartment with working appliances and a playground visible from the window. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. Then came the question she'd been dreading. Hudson was 4, playing with toy cars on their living room floor. Out of nowhere, he looked up at Brielle with those eyes, Devin's eyes, though she never told him that, and asked, "Where's my dad?" Brielle's heart cracked. She knelt beside him, choosing her words carefully. "Your dad made choices that meant he couldn't be part of our family, but you have me, Grandma, Grandpa, and Aunt Rhonda, who love you more than all the stars in the sky." Hudson considered this with the seriousness only a 4-year-old can muster. "Okay, can I have a snack?" Just like that, the moment passed. Children are remarkably resilient when surrounded by genuine love. But Brielle knew the questions would come again. Harder questions. Questions she'd have to answer when they were old enough to understand rejection and abandonment and billionaires who chose empires over their own children. She'd cross that bridge when she came to it. For now, she focused on what she could control, showing up, loving fiercely, and building a life where Hudson and Sienna knew they were wanted, even if their father had decided they weren't. 6 years passed, 6 years of Hudson's space obsession and Sienna's watercolor paintings. 6 years of scraped knees and bedtime stories. 6 years where Devin Carrington existed only as biology, never as presence. Brielle had deliberately built a life where he didn't exist. She avoided news articles featuring his name, unfollowed mutual connections on social media, changed her jogging route so she'd never accidentally pass his corporate headquarters. She became an expert at erasing him from her daily reality. Then her boss insisted she attend the Cancer Research Gala. "It's not optional, Brielle. The foundation gave us a substantial grant. Leadership needs to show up." She almost called in sick, almost invented a family emergency. But her career mattered. The salary that kept her children fed and clothed depended on moments like this. Professional networking, donor cultivation, playing the game. So she borrowed a dress from Rhonda's daughter, arranged overnight childcare with her parents, and walked into that hotel ballroom wearing confidence she'd spent years building. The venue was exactly what she'd expected. Crystal chandeliers casting warm light across hundreds of wealthy guests, abstract ice sculptures slowly melting on tables draped in white linen, waiters circulating with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget. Brielle focused on her mission: make connections, represent her organization well, leave as soon as professionally acceptable. She'd been networking for maybe 40 minutes when she reached for sparkling water from a passing server's tray. Brielle, the voice came from behind her, a voice she hadn't heard in 6 years but would recognize anywhere. Her entire body went rigid. She turned slowly. Devin Carrington stood 3 feet away, champagne in hand, looking at her like he'd encountered a ghost. 6 years had changed him, silver threading through his temples, deeper lines around his eyes, a sharpness to his features that hadn't existed before. His tuxedo probably cost more than her rent. The watch on his wrist, a Patek Philippe she recognized from magazine advertisements, represented $500,000 of unnecessary luxury. Devin! She kept her voice neutral, professional. I didn't expect... You look well. The understatement almost made her laugh. She looked well. She'd survived 6 years of single motherhood, poverty, exhaustion, and his complete abandonment. But sure, she looked well. Thank you, if you'll excuse me. Wait. His hand moved toward her elbow. Stopped midair when he caught himself. Can we talk? Just for a moment. Please. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to walk away and maintain the clean separation she'd worked so hard to build. But something, curiosity maybe, or the part of her that had never fully healed, made her hesitate. 5 minutes. They moved to a quieter corner near the silent auction tables, an ironic location given that's where they'd first met at a different gala years ago. Devin looked uncomfortable. He kept adjusting his cufflinks, shifting his weight, avoiding direct eye contact. I've thought about you, he began. About that night. I handled everything so poorly. Poorly doesn't begin to cover it. I was terrified. The words came quickly, rehearsed. My father built fortunes and lost them, twice before I turned 10. I watched my mother sell her jewelry just to buy groceries. When I finally had success, when billions were within reach, I panicked. I saw anything that might threaten stability as dangerous. Brielle absorbed this, fitting new pieces into an old puzzle. Fear explained behavior without excusing it. You had choices, she said quietly. You chose your fear over us. I know. I've regretted it every single day. Part of her wanted to believe that, wanted to think his abandonment had cost him something real. I should go. Did you? He couldn't finish, but the question was clear. Did she keep the pregnancy? Anger, sharp and sudden, flooded through her. You lost the right to know about my life when you sent that attorney's letter. Good night, Devin. She walked away before he could respond. Found her coat. Left the gala an hour early. When she got home, Hudson and Sienna were asleep, stuffed animals tucked under their chins. She stood in their doorway watching them breathe, grateful for the 1,000th time that she'd chosen them. She assumed that awkward encounter would be the end of it. One strange coincidence filed away under life's weird moments. She had no idea what was coming, because billionaires don't give up easily, especially when they realize what they've lost. She thought one awkward conversation would satisfy his curiosity. She was wrong. The first time Brielle noticed him, she convinced herself it was coincidence. She'd stopped at her usual coffee shop near the office, the one where she grabbed her morning latte before work. There he was, sitting in the corner, newspaper open, eyes tracking her every movement. The second time was at the farmer's market. Saturday morning routine with Hudson and Sienna. They loved picking out fresh fruit, arguing over which apples looked best. Brielle was comparing strawberry containers when she felt it. That prickle on the back of her neck that means someone's watching. Devin, 20 feet away, pretending to examine organic tomatoes he'd never cook. The third time shattered any illusion of coincidence. Preschool pickup. 3:15 on a Tuesday. Brielle was waiting in the designated parent line when she spotted a sleek black car that didn't belong. Tinted windows, engine running, and through the windshield, him. Her fear transformed into fury. She marched to that car, knocked on the window hard enough to hurt her knuckles. He lowered it slowly, and she saw something in his expression that terrified her more than anger ever could. Desperation. You need to stop, she said, voice low but fierce. Whatever this is, stop it now. I saw them. His words came out broken. At the market, their eyes. They have my mother's eyes. My eyes. You have no right. Are they mine? The question exploded out of him. Brielle, please, just tell me, are those children mine? She wanted to lie, wanted to deny him the satisfaction of knowing, but standing there in that parking lot, watching this billionaire unravel because he'd finally realized what he'd thrown away, she found she didn't have the energy for dishonesty. You lost the right to ask that question 6 years ago. She walked away, collected her children, and drove home with hands shaking so badly she had to pull over twice. That night she called Rhonda. Then she called a lawyer Rhonda recommended, a family law specialist who'd built her career defending single mothers against wealthy ex-partners. Farah Chen met with Brielle 2 days later. Sharp, no nonsense, with eyes that had seen every trick desperate fathers tried to pull. Document everything, Farah instructed. Every sighting, every approach, every word he says. Brielle documented it all. She thought preparation would protect her. Then the custody petition arrived. The legal filing was 37 pages of carefully crafted fiction. Devon's attorneys, the most expensive legal team money could buy, painted him as a father who'd only recently discovered his children's existence. They claimed Brielle had deliberately hidden his kids from him, denying him parental rights. They portrayed her as someone who'd kept secrets out of spite. The petition twisted reality until it became unrecognizable. Made him the victim, made her the villain, made 6 years of abandonment disappear behind expensive legal language and strategic omissions. Farah read through the documents with professional disgust. This is garbage, she said flatly. We have his attorney's letter denying paternity. We have your voicemail records. We have documentation of his demands back when you first told him about the pregnancy. He doesn't have a leg to stand on. Can he take them from me? Brielle's voice cracked. He has unlimited resources, private jets, billions of dollars. I can't compete with that. Money doesn't trump documented abandonment. Courts prioritize children's best interests, not billionaire egos. But Brielle couldn't shake the fear, because she'd learned something crucial about Devon Carrington. When he wanted something, he didn't stop until he got it. And now he wanted her children. Can billionaires buy their way into fatherhood after abandoning children? One judge was about to decide. The legal battle consumed the next 8 months of Brielle's life. 8 months of depositions where Devon's attorneys asked invasive questions about her finances, her parenting, her personal life. 8 months of character witnesses being interviewed. Neighbors, co-workers, friends who'd watched her raise Hudson and Sienna alone. 8 months of sleepless nights wondering if wealth could actually override documented abandonment. Devon's legal team built their case methodically. They showcased his transformation into a philanthropist who donated hundreds of millions to children's hospitals, educational initiatives, and youth programs. They presented financial statements proving he could provide opportunities Brielle never could. Elite private schools, worldwide travel, connections that could open any door. Mr. Carrington has spent the past 6 years building not just wealth, but a legacy of giving back, his lead attorney argued during preliminary hearings. He's grown, matured, and is now prepared to offer these children everything a father should provide. They painted him as a man who'd been young and scared, who'd made a terrible mistake but had since become someone worthy of fatherhood. It was compelling, dangerously compelling. But Farah Chen was relentless. She presented the original letter from Devon's attorney, the one denying paternity and demanding Brielle cease contact. She submitted voicemail records showing Brielle's attempt to inform him about the twins, calls he'd deliberately ignored. She brought in the ultrasound technician who'd told Brielle about the twins 6 years earlier, establishing a clear timeline of when Devon knew and chose to walk away. Rhonda testified for nearly 2 hours about Brielle's dedication, about the nights she'd found Brielle asleep at her desk, studying for her master's degree after the twins went to bed, about the careful budgeting, the sacrifices, the unwavering love that kept those children thriving despite limited resources. I've known Brielle Montgomery for 6 years, Rhonda said from the witness stand, looking directly at the judge. I've watched her be both mother and father to those babies. She's never missed a doctor's appointment, never forgotten a school event, never made those children feel like they were anything less than the center of her world. Meanwhile, Mr. Carrington was building his empire in dating models. You tell me who deserves to be called a parent. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. The final hearing arrived on a gray October morning. Brielle dressed carefully in a conservative navy suit Rhonda had helped her pick out. Rhonda sat in the gallery like a guardian, hands clasped in prayer. Judge Patricia Moreno, a family court justice with 23 years on the bench, reviewed the materials with intense focus. She asked pointed questions of both sides, but her attention kept returning to the attorney's letter Devin had sent 6 years ago. Mr. Carrington, Judge Moreno said, peering over her reading glasses, you're asking this court to grant you custody of children you actively denied and avoided for 6 years. Help me understand what changed. Devin stood, composed despite the tension. Your Honor, I made terrible mistakes driven by fear and immaturity. Seeing Ms. Montgomery again made me realize what I'd lost. I want the chance to be the father I should have been from the beginning. And Ms. Montgomery's attempts to contact you about the pregnancy? The voicemail informing you of twins? I was wrong to ignore her. I was focused on building my company and made selfish choices I deeply regret. Judge Moreno turned to Brielle. Ms. Montgomery, what do you believe is in your children's best interests? Brielle rose, heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Your Honor, Hudson and Sienna are thriving. They're happy, loved, secure. Mr. Carrington had 6 years to establish a relationship. He chose not to. I won't subject my children to someone who views them as accessories to his lifestyle, rather than human beings deserving of consistent, unconditional love. The judge nodded slowly, making notes. I'm going to take a brief recess. 30 minutes felt like 30 years. Brielle sat in the hallway, Rhonda's hand gripping hers, trying to breathe. When they were called back, Judge Moreno's expression revealed nothing. I've reviewed the evidence, the testimonies, and the applicable law. Family law prioritizes the best interests of children above all else. She looked directly at Devin. Mr. Carrington, your documented rejection of these children, your explicit demands regarding the pregnancy, and your 6-year absence constitute abandonment. Your current billionaire status does not erase your fundamental failure to be a parent when it mattered most. Brielle's vision blurred. Ms. Montgomery has provided consistent, loving care under difficult circumstances. The children are bonded to her, thriving in her care, and deserve stability. Therefore, I'm denying Mr. Carrington's petition for custody. Ms. Montgomery retains sole legal and physical custody. The gavel struck. Brielle's knees nearly gave out. Rhonda caught her, both women crying with relief that shook their entire bodies. Across the courtroom, Devin stood frozen, the weight of his choices finally real. Outside, rain had stopped. Pale sunlight broke through clouds. Brielle breathed deeply, feeling lighter than she had in months. Then she heard footsteps behind her. Devin caught up on the courthouse steps, alone. His attorneys had scattered. He looked broken in a way money couldn't fix. Brielle, please, I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking for a chance. Not through courts or lawyers. Just let me try. She studied him, this man who'd been her greatest love and deepest wound. You had a chance, Devin. The day I told you I was pregnant. The day the twins were born. Every day since. You chose yourself every single time. People change. Maybe. But my children's stability isn't the place for you to experiment with personal growth. If you're serious, do the work. Counseling, parenting classes. Prove through actions, not words, that you've changed. Then maybe we can discuss supervised visits. But their emotional safety comes first. Always. She walked away, meeting Rhonda at the car. Months passed before Brielle heard from Devin again. When she did, it wasn't through lawyers or surprise appearances. It was through Farah, who forwarded quarterly reports from his therapist, documented proof that he'd enrolled in intensive counseling, and completed a 16-week parenting program designed for absent fathers seeking to rebuild relationships with their children. He's doing the work, Farah said during one of their check-ins. Not just showing up, actually doing it. Brielle read the reports carefully. Session notes about unpacking childhood trauma from watching his father lose fortunes. Exercises about managing fear-based decision-making. Homework assignments where he'd written letters to Hudson and Sienna that he never sent because he hadn't earned the right yet. Then came the trust funds. $10 million deposited for each twin's education. No strings attached, no custody demands, just resources set aside for their future. The legal documents specified Brielle had complete control. He couldn't touch the money, couldn't use it as leverage, couldn't even get updates on how it was used. It was the first time his wealth served them without conditions. When he started volunteering at children's literacy programs in underserved neighborhoods. Not high-profile charity galas where photographers captured billionaires writing checks. Actual hands-on work, reading to kids, helping with homework, showing up week after week to places that would never make headlines. Rhonda's daughter worked at one of those programs. She reported back, "He's there every Tuesday, rain or shine. The kids love him." A year after the custody ruling, Brielle agreed to one supervised visit. They met at a children's museum on a Saturday morning. Farah present, as agreed. Devin arrived early, visibly nervous in jeans and a simple sweater. No designer labels, no obvious wealth markers. When Hudson and Sienna walked in with Brielle, he knelt to their eye level. "Hi," he said softly. "I'm Devin. I'm an old friend of your mom's." Hudson studied him with scientific curiosity. "Do you like space?" "I do," Devin answered, voice thick with emotion. "Cool. Mom, can we see the planetarium?" The visit lasted 2 hours. Devin didn't push, didn't claim fatherhood, simply engaged with two remarkable kids who had no idea who he was. He listened to Hudson explain black holes with passionate hand gestures. He admired Sienna's interpretation of the dinosaur exhibit through an artist's eyes. Afterward, as they walked to their cars, Brielle saw tears on his face. "Thank you," he whispered. "This doesn't fix anything," she replied, "but it's a start." More visits followed, spaced months apart. Devin learned Hudson's obsession with Mars rovers and brought him a NASA mission patch. Nothing expensive, just thoughtful. And he attended Sienna's elementary school art show, sitting in the back row, applauding when her watercolor of their apartment building won third place. He never demanded recognition, never pushed for more than Brielle allowed. He showed up. 2 years after the custody battle, during a quarterly visit that had become routine, Hudson looked up from the board game they were playing. "Is Devin our dad?" Brielle froze. Across the table, Devin went completely still. "Yes," he answered quietly, meeting Hudson's gaze. "I am. But I wasn't there when I should have been. Your mom raised you, loved you, did everything a parent should do. I'm trying to earn the privilege of being part of your lives now." Hudson processed this with characteristic thoughtfulness. "Okay, are you staying this time?" The question shattered every defense Devin had ever built. "Yes, if you'll let me, I'm staying." Sienna looked up from her drawing. "Can you come to my dance recital next month?" "I'll be there," he promised. And he was. Front row, flowers in hand, having rearranged a board meeting about a $100 million investment to attend. He watched his daughter perform with concentrated grace, her movements telling a story without words. When she finished, his applause was the loudest in the room. He came to Hudson's Science Fair where a volcano experiment erupted all over the display table, covering the judges in baking soda foam. Instead of embarrassment, Devin helped clean up, laughing alongside his son about the successful failure that taught more than perfection ever could. He showed up again and again. No longer the man who'd calculated children as risks, but someone learning that love required presence even when inconvenient. 3 years after the courthouse steps conversation, the visits had evolved into regular family dinners. Nothing forced. Just time spent together. Pizza nights where Hudson explained his latest space discovery and Sienna painted portraits of everyone at the table, including Devin. If this story is teaching you something about forgiveness, second chances, or knowing your worth, hit subscribe. We share stories with real lessons here. And comment below. Do you believe people can truly change? This story says yes, but I want to hear your truth. The transformation wasn't instant. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, consistent, and earned through 1,000 small choices to show up when showing up mattered. And slowly, Brielle began to believe that maybe, just maybe, people really could change. Something shifted between them during those family dinners. Small things at first. The way Devin would catch Brielle's eye across the table when Hudson told a particularly elaborate story about black holes. How she'd laugh at his terrible dad jokes, the kind he'd learned specifically to make the kids groan. Moments that felt less like co-parenting and more like partnership. 4 years after the courthouse steps, Devin asked Brielle to coffee. Just the two of them. They sat in that same shop where he'd once shown up uninvited, but everything felt different now. He stirred his coffee nervously, words clearly rehearsed but still difficult to say. My therapist asked me something last week that I can't stop thinking about. He paused. She asked when I was going to stop punishing myself and allow myself to be happy, to accept that I've changed and done the work, to forgive myself. Brielle set down her cup, giving him her full attention. And have you? I'm trying, but I realized I can't fully forgive myself until I know if you've forgiven me. Not forgotten. I know what I did can never be forgotten, but forgiven. She looked out the window at people passing by, each with their own complicated stories. She thought about the past 8 years, the struggle, the loneliness, the fierce joy of raising Hudson and Sienna. And she thought about the past 4 years watching Devin transform from ghost to presence to something solid and real. I forgive you, she said, turning back to face him. I don't know exactly when it happened, but somewhere along the way, I let go of the anger. I watched you become the man I once believed you could be. She took a breath. And I fell in love with that man. His eyes glistened. Fell in love? Present tense? Present tense. I'm in love with you, Devin. Terrified and cautious, but in love. Their first dinner as a couple felt like a first date. Nervous energy, careful conversation, discovering each other again. He took her to a small Italian restaurant, nothing flashy, deliberately avoiding the high-end establishments his wealth could easily afford. More dinners followed, slow walks through the city, moments where he'd reach for her hand across restaurant tables, thumb-tracing circles on her palm, simple touches that said more than elaborate gestures ever could. 6 months later, he planned a proposal that honored what mattered most. He consulted Hudson and Sienna first, asking their permission during one of their regular Saturday breakfasts. Both kids practically exploded with excitement, Sienna immediately drawing plans for a family wedding, while Hudson calculated the optimal date based on planetary alignments. The actual proposal happened on a quiet beach, the four of them together. Same kind of secluded shoreline they'd visited years ago when everything was different. Hudson and Sienna knew what was coming, barely containing their anticipation. When Devin knelt in the sand, ring box open, it wasn't just to Brielle. I'm asking all three of you, he said, voice thick. Will you let me be part of this family? Forever this time? Brielle said yes through happy tears. Hudson and Sienna tackled them both into an embrace that ended with all four of them in the sand, laughing and crying simultaneously. They married the following spring in his estate's garden, but Brielle designed everything. Simple decorations, wildflowers, and string lights instead of elaborate centerpieces. 50 guests instead of 500. Rhonda sat front row, dabbing her eyes. Farah attended as a friend, no longer their attorney, but someone who'd witnessed their entire journey. During the toast, Devin stood with his champagne glass, voice steady but emotional. Most people get one chance at love. I was foolish enough to throw mine away, but Brielle in her infinite grace gave me something I didn't deserve. A second chance. I will spend every remaining day honoring that gift. Brielle's toast came next, her hand finding his. Love isn't about perfection or wealth or status. It's about showing up, growing, and choosing each other every single day. Devin chose fear once, but he's chosen us every day since. And I choose him too. They danced as the sun set, surrounded by the people who'd supported them through the worst and now celebrated them through the best. This wasn't just a happy ending. It was an earned one. After the wedding, they faced the beautiful challenge of building a life together. Devin wanted to buy them a mansion, something worthy of his billionaire status. Brielle chose differently. They found a comfortable 4-bedroom house in a neighborhood with good schools and tree-lined streets. Not modest by most standards, but a home rather than a statement. a place where Hudson and Sienna could have friends over without feeling like they lived in a museum. He scaled back his business commitments significantly, appointed trusted executives to manage daily operations, started saying no to board meetings that conflicted with soccer games, learned that watching Sienna's art shows mattered more than closing another $100 million deal. 2 years into their marriage, Brielle discovered she was pregnant again. This time, everything was different. Devon's reaction was pure joy, immediate embrace, tears of happiness, whispered promises about being present for every moment. He attended every appointment, read pregnancy books obsessively, built the nursery with Hudson's enthusiastic help that mostly involved more laughter than actual construction. Their daughter Hope arrived on a sunny morning with Hudson and Sienna waiting eagerly to meet their baby sister. When the nurse placed Hope in his arms, Devon looked at Brielle with wonder that couldn't be bought. "She's perfect, worth more than every billion I've ever made." Years passed in the way good years do, quickly but richly. Hudson and Sienna grew into remarkable teenagers who understood the complexity of their story. On their 16th birthday, Hudson raised his glass during their family dinner. To Dad, who proved that people can actually change when they choose to do the work, and that being a real father matters infinitely more than being a billionaire. Sienna added her own toast. And to Mom, who was strong enough to let him prove it, and to Hope, who gets both parents loving her from day one. Like we all do now. The children carried forward lessons learned. Hudson became an aerospace engineer, designing sustainable spacecraft systems. Sienna built a career as an art therapist working with children from difficult backgrounds. Hope followed her own path into pediatric medicine, specializing in supporting single-parent families. Each carried forward what their parents had taught them about grace, accountability, and the courage to change. Decades later, Brielle and Devon still hosted family gatherings where grown children brought grandchildren who never knew about custody battles or courthouse steps. They'd watch their parents slow dance in the kitchen after dinner, still completely devoted after all those years. "Was it worth it?" Hope asked her mother once. "Giving him that second chance?" Brielle looked at her husband across the room, playing on the floor with grandchildren who adored him. "He earned it," she said simply. "That's what made it worth everything." This wasn't just a happy ending. It was an earned ending. Because real love isn't about perfection or wealth. It's about showing up, growing, and choosing each other when it's hard. That's what makes a billionaire's redemption worth more than all his billions combined.